Welcome to the Nonprofit Voice Tech Series, a special edition of the Nonprofit Voice podcast, hosted by Mark Becker, founding partner of Cathexis Partners and editorial advisory board member of Nonprofit Pro. In each episode of this monthly installment, Mark will have conversations with prominent nonprofit organizations and industry thought leaders to learn more about different technology offerings in the marketplace. Join us, and together we will learn more about these innovative digital tools and how to navigate the rapidly evolving technology landscape.
All right. Hello again, everybody. Mark Becker here, the founding partner of Cathexis Partners. I am joined today by Kristin and Mitch, and I'm going to allow them to let them introduce themselves. Kristin, you want to go ahead and kick it off?
Sounds great. Thanks for having us, Mark. My name is Kristin Giant. I am the Chief Growth Officer at Pond, and I have spent my entire career and, frankly, my entire life in the nonprofit and impact sector. I grew up with two parents working for nonprofits, and I followed in their footsteps. I'm an attorney with a passion for bringing kind of the efficiencies of the for-profit sector to the heart and passion of the nonprofit sector, and I'm really excited to chat today.
Great. And Mitch?
Thank you. Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Kristin, for kicking it off. My name is Mitch Stein. I'm one of the co-founders of Pond and the CEO and Chief Impact Officer. I had a more roundabout way of getting to the sector than Kristin here, but my background was originally as an investment banker. So a little unusual probably for joining your podcast, Mark, but about a year and a half ago, I decided to leave the banking world behind, as I had just seen firsthand some problems in the nonprofit space that really kept me up at night, which I feel like is the common thread for any founder story. Is there's just that thing that you can't go on existing in the world without doing your best to try and solve. And for me, it was seeing how challenging it was for a nonprofit I worked with to find and leverage good tech in their own fundraising. I started asking around to folks to see, like, I love these folks, but is this a them problem, or is this something broader? And it clearly was something much broader in this space, that even well-resourced, well-funded organizations had so much inefficiency in finding and leveraging good tools and technology that it was completely inaccessible for the vast majority of organizations in the sector doing incredible work around the country and around the world, quite frankly. So that was the inspiration to do something about it. And my job was covering a lot of marketplace businesses. And I thought that we could really bring a solution to bear, and what I like to call a market solution, something that's sustainable. It is not reliant on one company building one great product. It's about building the infrastructure and the marketplace that helps tons of companies build tons of great products to serve, the millions of missions around the country. So that was really the inspiration behind Pond, and I'm excited to talk about all things tech and all the myths around technology today that hopefully we can do some myth busting with you today, Mark.
So a lawyer, an investment banker, and an IT project manager walk into a podcast, and here we are. that
People
definitely
just
sounds
turned
like
off the app.
Yeah, I hope we didn't just immediately lose everybody from the conversation.
I think it's great because you come from different, perspectives, as did I, because I originally was a corporate IT project manager before I went into the nonprofit space. And I started going to nonprofit conferences and talking to staffers and hearing their woes about the technology that they had, and how cumbersome it could be, and all the hassles and issues they have with it. And I realized, I think I can help with this, and that's what got me involved. So I think this is a great group to cover this topic of demystifying nonprofit tech, right? So yeah, Mitch, I think you shared with me in advance some common myths. Do you want to kind of talk through, get the party started on this conversation?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I would also, I think Kristin's seen a lot of this firsthand, so I'd invite her to share some of the, you might call them personas, I'd call them lived experiences of the people that we see experiencing these things. But I think for context, we really started Pond to lower the barriers to better tech usage for the whole sector, and not just those who can afford it. And I think those barriers are always a mix of real and perceived limitations. and often perception is reality. So I think we call attention to some of those perceived limitations, while we believe our platform is helping to lower some of the real and systemic limitations. So one of the big limitations that we find people put on themselves in the sector is the classic, I'm not a tech person. I think when I would forget the exact stat, it's like 90% of nonprofits are fewer than 50 people, or whatever the number is. It's like when you're at an organization size that small, and you all are wearing so many hats, you are a tech person. You can decide whether you want to like embrace that and get the most out of it, or you can be passively the receiver of the tools the organization uses. I think it also is joined by common expressions like, I'm not tech savvy, or I'm too blank for new tools, fill in the blank with your own insecurities. And I think that tech is really that trigger word. It's intimidating, it's othering. If you've been in the nonprofit space for a long time, the best tools and products probably weren't available to you historically or designed for you. So it just doesn't feel very welcoming. And I think, I'm sorry.
If I can interrupt, Mitch, it was really nice of you to give me permission to talk. And Mitch has worked with me long enough to know that what I really need is permission to shut up most of the time. But I think the flip side, and I'm so glad that we started with this one, is yes, there are some weaknesses that cause people not to think they're tech people. And in the sector, there are strengths that cause people not to think they're a tech person. So it is the most human-centered, person-centered sector out there. And I think people will, they might say I'm too old for tech, or I'm not smart enough for tech, but they also might say, I love my donors too much to put tech between us. I love my constituents too much to put tech between us. So just to add that nuance, that people might have a negative reason for not thinking they're a tech person, and they also might have an affirmative or positive reason for not engaging with tech, specifically with those really important donors. And that donor engagement piece of it, where they think, if I put tech in between me and people, it will do a disservice to that relationship.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, the term accidental techie, that should be like a badge of honor, right? I mean, we're all accidental techies, or it's your main gig, and not but it's everybody's side hustle, like it or not, especially in this, in this world we find ourselves these days, more so than ever. So it's really important to embrace it. And, it is disheartening when I hear people say, "Oh, I don't." I still occasionally run into people. I don't get the internet. I just, someone else. That's someone else's thing. Well, okay, but that you can't live that way in this world and get very far, or really, find your true goals if you're not embracing technology.
I love when people say, "I don't believe in."
Right.
Tech, or I don't believe in the internet. And I love just getting to say, like, actually it exists independent of your belief in it. It doesn't require you to believe in it for it to be.
It's going to be there anyways.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And yeah, I mean, with everything going on, even the virtual workspace requires people to be a lot more technical, right? And there's a lot of companies that forever, we see a lot of our clients that are moving to virtual, even if it's just a few days a week. They're like, yeah, I don't need to be in the office. And we've been virtual since before it was cool, since we started the company. So we know, how empowering it can be, and how much more you can get done and still have a family life and still run your kids around. I don't happen to have any kids, but I hear it's a thing, and they too exist.
Just because you don't believe in kids, Mark.
Right. Well, I also live next door to Disney World, so it's hard not to believe they exist. But yeah, it's impossible to ignore technology, and everybody has to hopefully embrace it to some degree, right?
Yeah, and I think the empowerment piece that you bring up, that sort of just happened without anyone having a say about it during the pandemic, is really important, because that's what you're excluding by the comment, "I'm not a tech person." You're missing out on the empowerment that comes from it. And I think there's been such a proliferation of tools and tech becoming more accessible and manageable, and it's no longer just like the CRM, right, is like the end all be all tech thing that like maybe I don't want anything to do with, maybe I do, but that's all there is for nonprofit tech. And I think that leads me to what I would flag as the biggest second myth, which is we don't have any tech needs. And I think it's obviously very tied into, I'm not a tech person, because if you don't have the perspective of what of your needs could be solved with technology or bolstered with your goals, bolstered with technology, I think that intimidation is tough to overcome, and recognizing, I could frame any problem, any goal, any issue at our organization through the lens of, I wonder what tools are out there that could help with this. It's not saying you need to all of a sudden stack up like 25 things, but you should be aware of the things that are out there and what you could use. And that's a strategic thing. That is not a tech thing. That is just a resource allocation strategic decision for your organization. I am aware of what's there. I'm empowered by that knowledge, and I'm making a decision to use it or not, but at least I know.
Yeah, really good point. And you've mentioned 25 things. I don't need them or whatever. And I bet you if anybody in the organization takes a brief, even a small organization takes an inventory of what you have. And by the way, you should do this and make sure you have all the admin usernames and passwords for things like your social media, your organization's social media accounts, your website, who all has access to administer your website. Do you even, anybody at the organization, have access to it? It might not be, something that you're thinking of, but yeah, definitely need to make sure that you even know what technology is running your organization.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because one of the first things that I always share, and this is actually, I think, urgently more important for a small nonprofit, is that tech audit. And if you've read any of Cal Newport's work in kind of the space of attention, specifically his book, Deep Work, you recognize that it's the things that you do that you didn't intentionally choose to do that destroy your ability to go deep into your mission and deep into your strategy and deep into your effectiveness. So I echo what you said to encourage nonprofits, especially one-person shops, 5-person shops, 10-person shops, to get together as a team. And actually, our startup did this one of my first weeks. And after like 15 minutes, we had 35, 40 different tech tools that, maybe one person was using, or maybe Mitch had adopted when it was just him and he hadn't logged in 6 months. But that noise affects your ability to perform. That like latent buzzing of, we have 40 tools that none of us really understand, but that are still a burden on our time and are still taking up the space where we might be able to create a new program that will maximize our mission. But instead, we're logging into these 15 different content management system and social media scheduling. And also we're posting directly because we don't use the social media schedule, but we have to log into it before the board meeting because the board likes to see our plan for August. So then we spend an entire day at the end of July logged in, even though we know we're going to post natively. That noise starts to have a negative effect on your ability to dig into your mission. And, one of the things we're obviously encouraging people to get on tech, but we encourage people to audit your problems as well, because what problem are you solving with tech that you oughtn't to be? And then what problem are you not solving with tech that you ought to be? So we're the Ariana Grande of tech too, where we're like, break up with your tech tools if you need to. Like, it's okay, you can break up with them. We're not just saying add more and more, we're saying be thoughtful and intentional with each choice that you have. And we have to look in the mirror on that about once a week ourselves.
Well said. I like that a lot. Even the Ariana Grande reference. Well done. Drop that in within the first 15 minutes. I like it. Good job. Mitch, any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think doing the audit alongside like kind of a strategy goal audit of just a look in the mirror of like, what is it that we need? Because we do this all the time. We're talking to nonprofits joining Pond every day. And you get a good mix of people, and for folks' background, the way Pond works is nonprofits can create a free profile, share their needs. We share that with kind of the vendor tech provider universe to look at those needs, and if they think they're a good match to solve them, they can reach out and actually pay the nonprofit some money to pitch them, and that money goes in their account on Pond to spend on those tools. So we're kind of flipping the normal shopping experience on its head and making it more like a dating app that also actually compensates the nonprofit for their time. And so we end up doing a lot of counseling with nonprofit members who sometimes they're like, yep, we need a new CRM. I wanted to do X, Y, Z. We've had this before. We didn't like it. We want to do this. This is where folks like, they know everything they need. And so it's super efficient. We can share that with all the CRM providers on Pond. They're going to know where their rights plug in, and it's good for them to chat, and boom, 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 they can go from there. But a lot of the time it's like a version of we don't have any tech needs, where maybe they're one step further along, where they're like, I'm sure there's something out there, but these are the other 12 things I do day to day. And I don't have time to be like surfing the web, reading all of Mark Becker's 40 product comparisons around peer-to-peer fundraising, which, Mark, by the way, that was one of the first resources I came across when I left my last job to start Pond. And I was like, this is amazing. And it needs to live in a system. We need to like systematize this so Mark doesn't have to do all the legwork.
I agree.
Every other year. Because it's so great. And it was just such a good point of evidence that like someone looking at that, and that was just one product area, right? That was one peer-to-peer fundraising tools. And Kristin probably mentioned another 10 things nonprofits use in 1 minute. How can anyone understand the landscape across all these areas? So another big area is someone just giving voice to a need or a problem and not worrying about knowing the answer. There's sort of like this expectation that people, you need to know what the thing is that solves your problem before you can give voice to the problem. And what we love about the Pond platform is just meeting people where they are to say like, look, I don't know what the tool is or what's out there, but we need a lot of help with donor engagement. We're seeing a lot of churn. We're not getting much retention, particularly amongst younger donors. Like, what's out there that people are using that works well? And all of a sudden they're finding out about like, oh, wow, I didn't know there were robots that could write my thank you cards for me with my own handwriting, or I didn't know I could be sending personal videos to thousands of donors like they were a major donor. And there are all these kinds of tools through Pond that can help you do that. So I would just say that the antidote to we don't have any tech needs is just saying what your needs are and not worrying about framing them around technology.
I like it. And then I think your third tip was, or third myth was, tech is someone else's job, right? And it's so true, right? Everybody's job is that to some degree. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think when we are uncomfortable with something, there's a real bias to, and this, I'm speaking from experience, saying there's a lot of commonalities between a startup and most nonprofits. There's a bias towards, you want to be doing something, you feel like a constant pressure to be doing activity, and we're always biased to do the thing that's more comfortable. And for so many people in the nonprofit space, they are like crazy passionate about their mission, but they did not necessarily sign up for this work because they wanted to be evaluating CRMs or fundraising tools or things that feel more techy. And so there's a temptation to say that's someone else's job, or I'm not a part of it. And I think what, getting back to our discussion earlier around the strategic nature of all of this and, being aware of what's out there, one small example, we had an organization who was like, oh yeah, we've got someone on my board, they're an engineer, so like we're kind of covered on the tech front, I don't have to worry about it. And they're like, so when we needed to develop this like community platform, they were able to find a developer who did it super cheap for us. It was only like, $15,000. And I'm just listening to that and I'm like, okay, but also there, did you like test it beforehand? Was there a way for you to use a more out of the box solution? Because those things exist out there that could be like $50 a month for you to trial and get some evidence around. So when you kind of wholesale put it into someone else's camp, they're not going to have all of the context and understanding and strategic priorities of your organization to be more thoughtful around those decisions. And so it doesn't mean you need to spend all day on it, but like staying up to date in efficient ways and just being plugged in is huge, because guess what? The pandemic is still evolving. Like virtual is going to keep evolving. Tech is going to keep becoming more important to your organization, not less.
I think if I could add some additional color there as well. If you've had a roommate, including a spouse, someone else's job often means no one's job if your communication isn't flawless, right? Someone else's job means not my job and might mean no one's job. And one of the areas, Mitch's example about the board member that was an engineer, that person if you listed their name, would become the most sought after engineer on a board in America. Because guess what most engineers on boards do when they need a new website? Screen the calls from the ED, because they don't have time to design a website for a nonprofit in addition to their day job. And I think where we see the drag, the real inertia problem is it's not my job becomes not choosing. So this is where I think I am like the ideal sort of persona for Pond, and why I'm really passionate in my role of getting nonprofits on is I was the hungry, I don't know what, you don't want to hire me because I'm a lawyer and I'm asking to fill this $30,000 a year job, but I'm really passionate about this. And don't worry, I can also code. And I also know how to use 6 different CRMs, and I can do X, Y, Z because I've learned it, because I had to, right? Whether it's through board service or a role or for my own personal exploits. And that idea that if someone doesn't take ownership of it, no one does it, results in nonprofit websites being, and we see this all the time, looking like they were designed in in geosites in the 1980s. And it's not that hard. It's actually not that hard. It's the idea of no choice is a choice. No choice is a choice. Not your job is your job, right? You're just neglecting it. And I think it becomes Mitch said, I didn't get into this to design websites, but if your website is mission critical to your mission, then you did get in this business to design websites. And our goal, our hope is that people will get over that hump of it's not my job, because of course there's probably a fear or a scarcity mindedness or some sort of wound that is keeping you from trying. But there is like beauty and freedom on the other side. So if you're listening and you've struggled to get your website updated because that developer that you paid 6 years ago has had a complete 100% staff turnover, doesn't exist, whatever it is, like, listen, there's a better way. You don't have to call Joe to get your website updated. There's a better way, even with Joe, right? It doesn't have to be independent of Joe, the web guy. He can be involved, but it's just that little extra piece of empowerment. And maybe it's empowering a junior person on your team. And instead of kind of hoarding that power or worrying that because you're only paying them $24,000 a year, you can't put another thing on their plate, they might find great joy in getting to own a piece of this tech, especially people who grew up in kind of a more tech literate era. So I echo what Mitch said and remind people listening, if you're listening to this and you say something's not your job, make sure that someone on the org chart, it is their job, or look in the mirror and realize it's yours. It is yours. You just haven't claimed it yet.
This conversation, I want to spin it in so many different directions. Great stuff. And so the first rabbit hole I want to go down based on all of this is, even for mid and larger organizations that have an IT department, I've seen organizations or the IT department step in and say, hey, we're the ones that are going to select technology. And I'm like, well, not so fast. What do you know about peer-to-peer fundraising, for example? Or what do you know about grant management, and you need to make sure you have the requirements. Sure, you probably know an RFP process if you want to go down that road, but is an RFP process even necessary, i.e. Pond, right? A much more sane way, I think, of finding, the right solution. But it starts with making sure you have your requirements, right? And is the IT department, if you have one, going to be the best source of that? Absolutely not. They might have the best process, or they might have a process for you to consider in the selection criteria, but the requirements have to come from the people using it, and the ones that their jobs are tied to those objectives and goals, right?
I think a great metaphor here is the accounting procedures. The commonly accepted accounting procedures for nonprofits and for-profits are different. A great CPA knows the differences. A great for-profit CPA might not know the differences. And I've seen this come up on a lot of boards where a new CPA joins and is like, hey, everything about your accounting is wrong. And then the executive director has to educate them on the fact that there are some nuances in nonprofit accounting. It's the same thing. Are you an expert in the field generally? Are you an expert in the field specifically? And how can you make collaborative decisions with the expert in kind of this niche and the expert in the mission. I'm so glad you flagged that. I think it's a great point.
Yeah, and I think something that we did, and Kristin brought up the tech audit earlier, and we've a tech startup. We certainly have engineers on our team, but we went through our list of tools and platforms we used as a company, and actually like designated a captain and like a lieutenant on every single core platform that we use, and one of them needed to be non-technical. And so I think that level of ownership on assessing, even if this is the continued right thing, what are we using it for, regularly checking in on what were our goals with this thing, is it achieving them? If not, what are the alternatives? How are people using it? What are the rules of the road we want to abide by for this tool in terms of compliance and accountability, and even with communication tools, like, do you use this to bother someone on the weekend, or is that meant for another channel that doesn't notify? Like that level of detail and ownership, and making it shared between tech and non-tech, I think develops a lot of that too, Mark, where it kind of forces people, whether it's a major system or not, you still want to be thoughtful and like, why do we use this? What's it for? Is it achieving that thing? And who's kind of owning that?
I like it. Yeah, you start thinking about things. My head automatically, as you're saying that, spins off to things like Slack and Teams and all of that. And what are the run rules for that? And I like the idea of having the SME, the subject matter expert, but also the other person as kind of another star to guide the direction of this thing. I like that a lot.
And as new people join, you assume that new person knows how you all use Slack, and like they might not, like they get a message and think they need to respond in 2 seconds on a Friday night, and not, hey, actually no, our team culture with Slack is that it's not a place you have to respond immediately, or whatever. We're using one specific example, but with tech being so pervasive and all of us working in some level of hybrid, remote, in-person capacity, do your new joiners a favor and kind of codify what you're using and why and how, so that people don't trip up. And then, especially if you don't have the good communication to call them out or call them in or give feedback, they could all of a sudden be veering off the path of good performance to really no fault of their own.
Great point. Yeah. And when it comes to tech, I see some organizations that are sometimes looking at like the latest cool thing, maybe it's AI, data, enrichment, products, wealth screening, all of those types of things, which are great and very powerful, and a lot of great options out there, both high cost, low cost. Well, I'm not sure if low cost is ever an existing thing, but more moderate, lower cost options. So there's definitely different sizes for everybody. But then I talk to them and find out that they don't even have some of the basics set up, like dynamic ask in their donation forms based on past giving, even truly mining the data they have. So do you have any advice or thoughts around, obviously with Pond you're helping people find the right technology, but what about even just maximizing what you're doing, or making sure you even have the bases covered to start with?
Sorry, Kristin, you want to go ahead?
No, it's okay. As the champion of tech within, at this point, 5 different nonprofits that could not have been more different, as the cheerleader, champion, person who's like dragging everyone else along, upfront investment is massively, massively important. And I don't necessarily mean money, but you'd much rather bring in a consultant if that's the right move on day one, especially a consultant if you can find one who has side-along experience in change management. So you have implementation of the tool, but also someone who can help you navigate through changing the way that you do something. It is massively important on the front end to invest. And I think the other thing, if you're a leader listening to this, is if there's a new tool allowing iteration and experimentation. especially because as nonprofits, the likelihood, especially if you're a mid-range or small, the likelihood that you're able to afford all of the bells and whistles is low. So Salesforce with everything is the easiest tool in the world to use. Salesforce at the nonprofit enterprise level is one of the hardest tools to use. You're going to have to experiment and iterate to shove your nonprofit into some of these tools. And so allowing iteration, allowing experimentation, not writing the rule book on day one, maybe writing a rule book 6 months in, revising that rule book a year in, and trusting that the rule book is a moving, changing document, especially because a lot of these tools are getting updated monthly, biannually. So those would be my 2 pieces of advice as someone who's done it, is new tech, even something small, and Mitch mentioned this with rules of the road, requires change management. If you're used to running out of a spreadsheet that you control completely, and suddenly everyone has access to your data at a company, that is a massive change. That is a sea change in a culture. So to recognize that change management is, there's people that are paid millions of dollars to manage change. So it shouldn't be easy. You have to pour into it and to invest that time and energy up front. And I know Mitch has some thoughts here too.
Yeah, I think change, before Mitch, you jump in, I think I'm so glad you mentioned change management, because it's so often kind of an afterthought, and making sure that you have everybody's buy-in, all the stakeholders that are going to use whatever the platform is or be enriched by it and have their goals and objectives affected by it, needs to be involved in the process, and therefore much more likely to embrace that change. That's just a foundational piece that so many miss. But I love the way you talked about, putting together a rule book and making sure you're revising it, because things always are changing, and your goals are always changing, and your processes are always changing, and hopefully the technology is also changing too, right? So you need to make sure you're updating that along the way.
Yeah, and I think change management, it's relevant no matter the size of the organization, but particularly within a larger one, and particularly in nonprofits where it's no secret to anyone, turnover is an extreme problem folks deal with. Getting people excited or interested in the change management is a hurdle. And I've heard from a really awesome nonprofit leader, actually based in New York City, that I've worked with, that they throw a party for their staff which became like a virtual party where they had, some like sweets delivered to everyone's home to like celebrate together during COVID. But whenever there was like a new tool or a new thing people were learning, or kind of all needed to hold hands on, they made it interesting and exciting and a time for people to get together and celebrate it as like a step forward for the organization. Whereas oftentimes, if you don't intentionally set the tone around change management, it can often be like, oh God, it's just this other new thing, and I'm gonna have to learn this all new system. And there's a lot of anxiety, that real anxiety produced around that, that could be informed by, past negative experiences that you don't even know about, from baggage from individuals on your team. And so I think setting that tone of really holding hands around the change is key whenever you're going through a new adoption, in addition to spending the time and getting the right expertise. The other thing I was going to mention, Mark, on your original question around like if things are going kind of out of order, I think the tech audit is a good, I know we brought that up a few times, but having that all laid out will hopefully, for a lot of people staring at it, because it's easy to get excited about like, oh, I heard about this new AI tool that like is going to tell us what donors to talk to. And so now, it's going to like make our job so much more effective, but maybe you're missing the low hanging fruit of like, you have a PayPal button that's not integrated into your core website. It's like, right. Okay, like I'm so glad, and I don't want to disparage or discourage those people that are excited about something new, because that's a good energy and a good passion to have. And so you don't want to like take that away from them, but would also encourage to be like, look at what you have. Is that like the highest value change or thing to investigate? And that's why, getting back to what we said earlier around like, yeah, go learn about the things, like engage with what's out there, be aware, and then you'll be able to be like, okay, that's, that could be a $10,000 investment. And there's this free thing we could do on our website that might increase donor conversion by 20%. Let's weigh those options and where we want to spend our time and energy out the gate, as we're moving down this path of better tech and better tech usage, because it doesn't stop with that one thing. Like you can still get to the shiny tool, but it's kind of like building the foundation to get there is important. So I think the audit and awareness are the two key pieces of the right prioritization between them.
I like it. And, a method I'm always saying, crawl, walk, run, right? Make sure you get the basics down right. And I think that's the theme we've been kind of talking about throughout this is, make sure your website's easy to navigate, make sure that there's no hurdles to being able to make a donation. And that it should definitely include looking at your donation form from an outsider's perspective and seeing, does it look safe? Does it, resemble your main website? And will someone feel comfortable donating to it? And then kind of, take it to the next level. Whatever that platform or process is, crawl, walk, run. The first time, we ever talked to anybody about doing a peer-to-peer campaign, great. You want to do all these awesome things. I think you should, but let's make sure we get the basics down first. And it's real easy for people to register and donate, right? And then let's add all the bells and whistles around that. Could all happen in the first season. If you have the time and or budget or both, but make sure you focus on the fundamentals before you go too far, right?
Yeah. One thing that I'd raise on that point, Mark, which is a startup lesson, which is super relevant in the nonprofit world, whether tech-based or not, is just the concept of product market fit. And if anyone's heard of the lean startup, is kind of like part of the canon now around startup literature. But the core concept is like, how can you test? So it's amazing. You've got a great idea. Everyone's really excited about your idea. Whether that's for a brand new organization or a new fundraiser or a new program, like it can scale to all different levels. What are the ways you can test behavior around that idea with the smallest amount of investment possible of time, energy, money, whatever? And so I think this is super relevant with fundraising events, right? Where it's like a lot of people feel the pressure to like, we need to have this big bang success and 1,000 people there and raise $1 million. It's going to be so great. And it's like, okay, but if you're stepping outside of what you've done before, what are ways you can do a smaller starter event to just like, do people like doing a physical activity together? Do they bring their friends? Is there a super low cost platform you could test out when you're getting started before you go into the 1-year planning cycle around a bike ride across America? That's something that I would just really encourage anyone, whether it's tech-based or not, and we've made this mistake. Like every startup has probably made this mistake to some extent, where we built a whole platform that we spent 6 months on that we couldn't get people engaged in because we didn't really understand the problem of why they weren't engaging in tech. And it was a necessary step. We learned that we needed to actually save them time, give them funding, provide more expertise, and generate more trust in how they engage with outside vendors, which is how we evolved Pond. But if I could save people the trouble of finding those simpler ways to test, that is just so key to long-term success.
I like it. And yeah, you hit one of the key points that I always say. You happen to mention a cycling event across the country. Yeah, don't start with cyclists if you're starting a new campaign, because they're passionate. And I love cyclists, but they're going to be the most technical people you deal with, and they're going to have high expectations. And so if you're testing out anything new, make sure you have your game together, because if you're not a techie, well, guess what? They probably are. And I know I'm kind of grouping them all together, but that's just another way of me bringing up, if you're not technical, well, guess what? Your constituents may or may not be. And we hear all the time, I'm still hearing, our the persona of our attendees or people are going to be involved in this campaign are older and they're not very tech savvy. Well, you might want to give them a little bit more credit than you currently are. And they probably have higher expectations for what you're giving them than you might have yourself.
Yeah. And what you both said just highlighted like an adage that, and I'll use a personal example here, but networking tools, tools solutions, technology solutions, they will amplify what's good about your organization, and they will amplify what needs work in your organization. It's like a really high quality microphone, or, the switch to HD cameras, right? You can hear me better and you can see the zit on my chin better. And so it becomes, this is not a substitute for the work. And it is not a substitute for, everyone knows this, right? Social media tools did not make socialization better, period. They made socialization better, and they made socialization worse, because they amplified the good and they amplified the bad. So recognizing that what this can create is efficiencies that only tech can create in 2021, but it will not solve for the worst problem that your organization has, any more than it will take away from the strengths that you already have, which I think people are scared of both of those, right? They think it'll solve for the problem, and they're scared it'll take away from the good. And the answer is like both and neither, right? It's a tool, just like a hammer is not going to mow your lawn.
It's not, but once you have that hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so a few years ago, Mitch, kind of bringing this back full circle. A few years ago, you mentioned the peer-to-peer guide that we did. I had seen a kind of a gap in the industry where there's all these different peer-to-peer tools, and that's just, like you said, one point solution, right? There's grant management, there's accounting, there's CRMs, there's all these different things. There's well screening. And this is one area I thought I had a bit of expertise on. So I put the first guide together, and then we've done another version. Now we're going to do an online version of this to help people with their selection process a little bit. But I think you and the Pond team really take it to the next level. And I love what you're doing. So if you can just kind of describe again, kind of how Pond works with the ecosystem to help folks find technology, I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll give a quick overview, and then also invite Kristin to add on too. But I think that what's really different about the Pond model is every other shopping experience is reliant upon an assumption that the shopper has the time and capacity and money and awareness to go seek out the things that are out there and determine what they need to buy. And I think whether that's a review site that lists a bunch of options for something, or a blog post that says here's 10 peer-to-peer platforms, which like you can never really trust who is saying these things and who has paid for them to be there. It's a lot of it's a lot of information that's not super trustworthy, and there's tons of it. There's so much noise. And so Pond really flips this on its head to say, well, what if those companies could shop for you, but do it in a way that centers your needs, values your time, protects your identity, and creates a safe space for you, so that you're incentivized as a nonprofit leader to share more information. You can do it anonymously. It doesn't disclose, your organization's name or who you are, but it just gives you a space to type out those 4 sentences you just wish you could put into Google and have Google tell you exactly the thing, but it's not going to give you any real answer. So that's what you can do on Pond. You create a free profile, free listing. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to set it up. And when you do that, you then get back to work, and we basically canvas the vendor space out there to see if anyone looks at that and says, hey, I solved that problem. We provide that exact kind of auction tool. We help with grants management. We help with data analytics. We help with volunteers. As you mentioned, there's probably like 100 different categories of tools with hundreds of constituents of things. So putting the work on them to find the right potential customer, and they can put in a request to chat. And if the nonprofit wants to, it's totally up to them. They get to decide if they want to opt into a meeting to learn more about the solution. But if they do, they get $100 in their account, which they can build up a balance over time to ultimately help fund these tools that are so difficult to get the funding for.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's just a terrific model for folks to kind of find the technology they need in a different way without having to do all the running around. And like you said, yeah, I mean, I've seen some pretty interesting posts where one group says the top 10 of something, and I'm like, wait, that company doesn't even do that, or they are a company, an organization that does that, but wow, they're not even in the top. They don't even offer most of the features that most organizations are going to need. So yeah, I like that approach. It definitely brings a different model to it. So yeah, as we're wrapping up here, I mean, I could continue talking all day about this stuff, and thank you so much for joining me. But I think we do need to wrap up at some point. So, any final thoughts on all of the tech talk that we've been? Any last words of wisdom? Mitch, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just had two things I wanted to be sure and raise, which I think get missed commonly in the space. But we had an event last week in Philadelphia. We're getting nonprofits together, kind of part of the Pond community. It was great, and what I loved most and the most striking moment of it was in a conversation circle with a person that worked in alumni relations at a really large university, a person who worked in a local chapter for a national nonprofit, but pretty autonomous locally, and someone that ran a really grassroots small community center, like a one-person executive director with volunteers. And like, as we talked about what Pond did and the issues around technology, it was like the three of them all shared a very similar experience around like, yeah, sure, we have more time and people and money, but like none of us want to be spending that scouring the internet for the options, building these lists of what things are, trying to figure out what they do. Like we all have better things we can be doing. And I think a lot of people want to put those personas in a box and say like, oh, well, the American Red Cross would never need to use this platform, or they must not have any challenges figuring out what tech to use for different needs or in different departments. And you're like, it's a very shared experience. So I know we touched on a lot of different types of people and challenges they face around nonprofits and technology. Just want to reiterate that this is relevant and useful and time-saving for everyone. And the second thing I would just say is, for no matter the camp you're in, the persona, I'm putting air quotes around that because it's more of, it's a real person. It's not just a persona. That is, we see you out there. No matter your identity in this landscape, it just starts with a small step. It's like diet or exercise. If you all of a sudden are like, okay, I'm going to get my master's in IT and so I can help my mission better. It's like, no, like, let's take one small step together. You're going to plan that workout you're going to do tomorrow. You're going to create your Pond listing and just get started and dip your toe. Do the one small thing to move forward and get engaged and build on that over time.
I like it. And Kristin, anything else? Any final thoughts? Words of wisdom? Any more Ariana Grande references?
Well, actually, the one small step is a My Little Pony song, which my sons are very interested in right now. I will spare the audience me singing it, although it is taking literally all of my physical strength not to sing it right now, because that's the sort of person I am. But what I would add is, you are lucky. You are lucky, because everything comes back to your mission. So that is your superpower. That is your tool. When you're analyzing whether you want to break up with the tech tool, or if you want to get in a new relationship with a tech tool, you have a superpower that non-impact oriented for-profits lack when they're assessing these tools. They're saying, is this helping our sales team sell more? And even if the answer is incrementally yes, they're keeping that tool. You have an answer that is so much more profound to tie all of your questions to. So you start with a small thing, and at every step you're saying, if your area of impact and passion is racial justice, am I serving this mission better because I'm on Slack on Saturday at 10 p.m.? You have that extra pair of glasses to look at everything through. And that is the most important thing. And we never forget that at Pond. We know that most tech providers that are specific to the nonprofit sector don't want to ever forget that either. So remember that your mission is your superpower, and that no tool is going to replace that. That can't be automated away. AI can't tell your story to donors better than you can, but these are tools that are going to help you maximize your time, your energy, and your money. And we know that those are the three scarcest resources that you have. So we wish you luck out there in the tech ocean for sure.
I like it. Yeah, great message. And yeah, I would just, my final thing I would say is just, remember or try to think of, if you don't currently, that technology, those vendors are your partners. And if they're not, then find the ones that will be, because they're in it for the right reasons in most cases as well. There's ones that their primary thing is money, but there's a whole lot of us that are out here for the right reasons, trying to help organizations do better, and do more to reach their missions, and think of us as partners. And even if you're not currently working with a vendor, they're probably going to be very helpful, and if in helping you answer questions along the way. So don't be afraid to ask, and don't feel like every time you reach out to a vendor, you're gonna it's gonna cost you money. We're all here to help, and if we're not, we won't last long. And you'll know who those are. But
we're over here snapping to Mark's words of wisdom for the listeners.
Well, yeah, you guys have inspired me today. Thank you so much for joining me today. Check out joinpond.com to learn more about what they're doing over there. I think they're doing great things. Kudos to you guys. Kristin and Mitch, thank you so much for joining me today.
One small thing doesn't seem like a lot.
I love it. She couldn't help herself. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Nonprofit Voice. You can listen to more episodes of The Nonprofit Voice at nonprofitpro.com/podcast/the-nonprofit-voice. And remember, for your convenience, you can stream any and all episodes of The Nonprofit Voice on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify.